One of the most terrifying movies I have ever seen has got to be The Exorcism of Emily Rose. What really made it scary was that it was based on a true story. The true story of Anneliese Michel, who was a 23-year-old girl living in Germany in the 70s, who was apparently possessed by demons. And there's a lot of audio recordings and some pretty incredible firsthand testimony of what happened to this poor girl. There's one scene in particular that, while it is a dramatization of what happened to Anneliese, it is certainly an accurate portrayal of what did ultimately physically happen to Anneliese Michel, and it is one of the most hair-raising, horrifying scenes in movie history, in my opinion. It is just downright disturbing. And so today, I'm going to be looking at the real story that movie is based on, which is, of course, the Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. But before we get into today's story, if you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, well, then you've come to the right channel, because that is literally all I do. And I upload 3, sometimes 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, if you could, please gently eviscerate the like button and then subscribe and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's dive in. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Western Germany to a fiercely religious family. Devout Catholics who believed in some of the more extreme elements of the Catholic faith. Now, one of the things that they believed in and certainly pushed on to Anneliese and her siblings was this idea that sin could not be atoned on your own. It would require other people effectively sacrificing on your behalf for you to be absolved of your sin. And so Anneliese and her siblings would be instructed by her parents to, at times in the winter, sleep on the hardwood floor. In order to repent for sinners that can't repent for their sins on their own. And so she'd be laying on the floor in the middle of the winter, thinking that what she was doing was saving other people from their own sin. In 1969, Anneliese would have her first seizure. She was at school, she suddenly started seizing up and convulsing, and her classmates would later tell investigators and her family that it was almost like she'd entered into a trance-like state while she was having this seizure. And then as soon as the seizure had ended and she was done convulsing, she snapped out of the trance-like state. It wasn't until a year later when Anneliese had another seizure in the middle of the night. She had this convulsion and her parents come in and she's in this trance-like state and she's wet the bed and then she snaps out of it and she doesn't know what happened. It wasn't until this second seizure that the family actually sought medical attention. They actually went to a neurologist. That neurologist would tell Anneliese and her family that what she was suffering from was something called temporal lobe epilepsy, where, amongst a litany of horrible side effects, a few of the more significant ones are serious auditory and visual hallucinations, a loss of awareness, and intense mental state. So Anneliese was prescribed medication by this neurologist to try to combat this temporal lobe epilepsy, but it didn't seem to do anything. And in fact, her seizures and convulsions and this trance-like state she would go into during the seizures, it only persisted and intensified. And it got to a point where Anneliese and her family believed the best thing for her to do would be to go to a psychiatric hospital where the staff there was better equipped to handle what was happening to her. And so she checks in willingly, and they start experimenting with different drugs, and nothing seems to work. And in fact, her condition only gets worse. She starts having more seizures and more convulsions, and she starts having a regular visual hallucination. Whether she's having a seizure or not, everywhere she looked, if she looked at anybody in the face, their face would become demonic. Like it would be a demon's face that would look at her and say, "You're going to rot in hell." And so she began not being able to look at people in the face, and she would tell the nurses and doctors, like with her head down, about these demon faces she was seeing. And it was the first time she began espousing this idea that she was in fact possessed by demons. In fact, 6 demons by her count. When she passed on that information to her family that she believed she was possessed, she and her family believed that the psychiatric hospital was not enough, and in fact modern medicine was really not enough to handle what was happening to her. that they would need to search for help outside of medicine, and so they turned to the Catholic Church. Initially, all the clergy that Anneliese and her family approached to try to help her with the situation rejected her request, and they said, you need to seek medical attention. This is not something we can help you with. Not knowing where to turn, her family is kind of at a loss. At the same time, Anneliese's condition really nosedives. I mean, it was already pretty bad. It gets a lot worse. She began doing 400 plus squats every day, like compulsively doing squats. Then she began going under the table periodically and not coming out for 2 days, barking like a dog the entire time without sleeping. She began going to corners of the house and finding spiders and eating them off the ground. She would scurry over to the fireplace and pull coal out of the fireplace and eat the coal. I mean, she was really losing it. Finally, the family located a priest named Ernst Alt, who believed she was possessed and that she was not epileptic, and he was willing to petition the local bishop to allow the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism. And so that bishop granted permission for a local priest, Arnold Renz, to perform an exorcism with the full endorsement of the Catholic Church. Over the next 10 months, Renz would conduct 67 exorcisms of Anneliese. And through these exorcisms, Anneliese would reveal that she was being possessed by 6 demons: Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Nero, Fleischmann, and Adolf Hitler. And so all of these voices, these demonic voices that were coming out of Anneliese, they were picked up on audio recording during the exorcisms. And in the movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, the most iconic scene in the movie is the demon scene where they show off these voices coming out of, in the movie it's Emily Rose, but it's supposed to represent Anneliese Michel. And they do a fantastic job showing what that might have looked like during the exorcism. So take a look.
Give me your name, demon!
Names! Names! Adorator of the army of Shashika!
Ancient serpents! Depart from this servant of God! Tell me your 6 names!
We are the ones who dwell within. You Shoshohen Batokai Queen Habitabit in Rone Kesa Parothin in Udai Miklingyo Anablia. And I am Lucifer, the devil in the flesh.
And now I want you to take that scene you just watched of Emily Rose being possessed by these demons and think about that as you listen to the actual audio recordings of Anneliese Michel during one of her many exorcisms.
Ja, ich will auch für die anderen leiden, damit die nicht in die Hölle kommen und so. Aber dass das dann so schlimm ist und so grausam und so furchtbar, nee.
Ihr Klötze! Nein, ihr Klötze! Und mal mir Klötze! Oh, so down every line, don't.
Als Kind Gottes.
Ich hab ein Bruder geschlagen! Die Ruhe gibt's nur da oben.
Ruhe gibt's nur dort, wo die Liebe ist.
Ja, bei uns gibt's nur ja nun. Die müssen in eigenen Seminaren ausgebildet werden, die dürfen nicht auf die anderen Universitäten. Kapiert?
Geistes. Geboren hier auszufahren und nicht.
Initially, the exorcisms seemed to make things better for Anneliese. She got to a place where the seizures and convulsions and trance-like states and odd behavior were so few and far between that she actually re-enrolled in university and was even able to attend church, but it didn't last. In the spring of 1976, Annelise's convulsions and seizures and odd behavior came back tenfold, and she began becoming violent with her family members to where they couldn't even be around her without being attacked by her. But when she was left on her own, she would harm herself. She stopped eating, saying that the demons were not allowing her to eat, and all day long she would stand up and then drop to her knees to pray, and then get back up and drop to her knees to pray, breaking both her kneecaps and tearing the tendons in her knees, which seemingly did not faze her. But still, her family believed that what she needed was religious intervention, not medical intervention. Also, Annelise felt the same way, but some might say that she was not in a position to make that decision, that she had lost her ability to make that decision. But either way, they continued with the exorcisms. The final exorcism of Annelise took place on June 30th, 1976, and while Annelise did submit willingly to this exorcism, she was incredibly frail. She weighed under 100 pounds, and by the following morning, on July 1st, 1976, she had passed away due to dehydration and malnutrition. She was only 23 years old. After her death, Annelise's story was so sensational that it grabbed headlines all over Germany, and people were clamoring to learn more about how this could happen. That she was, apparently possessed and then died after all these exorcisms. Why wasn't there medical intervention? There was so many questions. And so ultimately what happened is her parents were charged with negligent homicide, but were actually not given a jail sentence because at the time in Germany, they ruled that the parents had already suffered enough, so they did not serve any jail time. And there were two priests, one of them being Renz, who were charged with negligent manslaughter, and they were sentenced to 6 months in jail. That was later suspended. To this day, people are absolutely split down the middle about what actually happened to Annelise Michel. Was it possession, or was it, like the neurologist said, a form of epilepsy, or was it something else? And furthermore, was psychiatric treatment or was modern medicine doing enough to help her? Or were they failing just as much as the exorcisms ultimately failed? It's a question that to this day people are really unsure how to answer. Her gravesite has become sort of like a monument for many churches around Europe. They will go and basically make the pilgrimage to her gravesite to pay their respects to a girl that they believe in some way died for their sins. So what do you think this was? Was this demonic possession, or was this epilepsy? Or was it something else? And how do you think they should have treated this case? I mean, obviously the medication she was on was not making it any better, but at the same time, the exorcisms didn't seem to do much better either. So how do you treat something like this? Let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as I possibly can. All right, that's gonna do it, guys. If you were interested in this story and like this type of content, if you would please gently eviscerate the like button and then subscribe to this channel, turn on all post notifications so you can get the 3 to 4 weekly uploads that happen on this channel every week. If you want to get in touch with me, you can hit me up on Instagram. My handle is JohnBallen416. I'm also very active on TikTok, where my handle is MrBallen as well. That's going to do it, guys. Until next time, see ya.